Geno Smith has come through in the clutch plenty of times in his 2+ seasons as starting quarterback, but no game may be bigger than the upcoming rematch against the Cardinals, both in the present and for his future. We'll be breaking it all down here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be rejoined here for Matchup Wednesday by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks looking to keep their momentum rolling. They've won 3 straight, and now they've got an ever so important rematch looming with the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to take a deep dive into 6 key matchups to watch heading in this game. And no, they are not all the same as they were just 2 weeks ago after seeing these teams play at Lumen Field. We get some interesting new wrinkles that we're going to dive into heading into this much anticipated rematch. And we'll be diving into just how critical this week could be for Geno Smith as he pursues an extension to stay the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks for the foreseeable future. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. When you look statistically, at least for the most part, Geno Smith has had a really strong first season in Ryan Grubb's offense. Passing yards wise, he's 3rd in the NFL. Big time throws for Pro Football Focus, he is 4th. He is in the top 3 for completion percentage. He has thrown the football really well. The touchdown numbers are out there. Obviously, more interceptions than you'd like to see, but some of that has to do with the offensive line. Some of it has to do with the fact the Seahawks have thrown the ball more than any team in the NFL, and they haven't had a run game really to speak of to complement him. And yet, here the Seahawks are. They're 7-5, Rob, first place in the NFC West, and they have an opportunity to truly take full command of this division with a rematch looming in Arizona. And some may scoff at this idea, but thinking about this, I believe that this is by a wide margin the biggest game of Geno Smith's career. Not the wild card game a couple years ago, not the game against the Rams that got them a wild card that year. This, to me, is the biggest game for him. He's going into the final year of his contract next year. He's looking for long-term security. If you want that long-term security, go win the NFC West. And I know this won't clinch the division, but it's going to be much closer for Seattle to take the NFC West if they can sweep the Cardinals. If they don't, suddenly it becomes much more bleak to try to get into the postseason, and that may be tough for the front office to handle in terms of whether they want to move forward with Geno Smith as their starting quarterback.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that, first off, as far as it being the biggest game of Geno Smith's career, I think that I have to agree with you in that assessment. Just because of the fact that obviously Seattle did win that game against the Rams a couple of years ago, did wind up going and losing against San Francisco 49ers. That was not a Seahawks squad that we thought that was likely to make a big postseason run. However, if the Seahawks are able to win the NFC West division, which is mathematically so much more likely to occur if the Seahawks are able to win this football game, not only have a 2-game lead in the division over the Arizona Cardinals, but then, of course, then you'd have the tiebreaker as well. So it's essentially a 3-game lead over the Arizona Cardinals with just 4 games to play at that point. Then yes, there is no question about it that this is a massive game for Geno Smith and the Seahawks as an entire team. That said, I also think that, of course, injuries happen. There are 4 more games after this. The Seahawks do have a more formidable schedule, at least on paper, than the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams, of course, are basically in the same spot at 6-6, and they have the 1-game advantage over the Seahawks. So we have to acknowledge that. Even the 49ers are 5-7, while their schedule is very very formidable moving forward, and of course injuries are piling up for San Francisco, then it does feel like Seattle has an opportunity here to basically put the rest of the NFC West in the rear view mirror. And if that is indeed the case, then Geno Smith is going to be able to kind of slay some of those dragons that are out there kind of breathing hot and heavy down his neck, so to speak. I mean, I think one of the big criticisms, and you kind of touched upon it a moment ago, Corbin, there just hasn't been as many touchdowns, and there's been damn too many interceptions so far this season. There's only been two games so far this season in which Geno Smith has thrown for more than one touchdown. So if you are going to be talking about $35+ million per season, you definitely have to have more production than that. Although maybe you don't, as long as you keep winning football games. If you win the division here, you host a playoff game and possibly make a nice little run here, then again, I think that you can make a strong argument that the Seahawks should be looking to extend Geno Smith. Although, as you mentioned, he does have one more year on his contract.
But we know that's when John Schneider likes to make things happen. He likes to get his key players extended with 1 year left in their contract. Very rarely is he going to let a standout player approach free agency and have to consider using the franchise tag, which he has been allergic to most of his time in Seattle, in large part because he doesn't get himself in a position where he has to use it. So this is the most important position in the sport. And for the critics that are out there for Geno Smith, listen, I think this game could go a long way towards silencing a lot of those critics, because I think one of the biggest arguments ever since Geno Smith took over as a starter in 2022 has been he can't win the big game. But look at the Giants that he has slayed already this year, going out and finally beating the San Francisco 49ers, albeit a team that's missing some key players. It doesn't matter. It's still the 49ers. They still had a lot of talent on the field there. And to go out and get that game-winning drive and run into the end zone and put the 49ers away, finally get that monkey off of his back. He's already done that. We know all of the game-winning drives he's orchestrated. I mean, he marched him downfield this last game against the Jets. And even though Charbonnet was the one that scored the touchdown, Geno Smith marched him down there. He had a 20-plus yard throw on that drive as well that keyed the Seahawks to getting that touchdown. We have kind of seen him step up late in games more and more as he's gotten more experience as the starting quarterback. But what he doesn't have on his resume, the thing that is missing, yes, you took the Seahawks surprisingly in the playoffs 2 years ago, but you don't have that NFC West title. You don't have that division championship. You don't have a home playoff game, which they haven't had since 2020 when Russell Wilson was still under center. So, and oh, by the way, that game didn't have any fans because that was the COVID season. Seahawks fans are dying for playoff football at home. It has been way too long, but Geno Smith has not been able to do that these first couple of years. Can you slay that dragon, put this team back on your back, and find a way to win in Glendale? He did it last year and the year before. He's got a good track record playing at State Farm Stadium. Can you do it again, though, when the Cardinals have their backs against the wall? Can you finish them off? I know they wouldn't be eliminated, but it would be very difficult for Arizona to win this division or make the playoffs if you go out and steal this win and you've swept Arizona. To me, this is that missing piece on that resume that you could then go to John Schneider, if you're Geno Smith and his agent, and say, look, I waited out this season. I wanted an extension before the year, but look, I just won a division title for you. This is not a good quarterback class coming into this draft. You and I would agree with that assessment. This is my contract I'm looking for. I just won you a division title. I think it's much easier to get that from John Schneider if you have that NFC West championship on there. I think this is a pivotal game to make it happen.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Again, I mean, just considering the fact that the NFC West is as tight as this one is, then it really does feel like this is an opportunity for Geno Smith to kind of, move the needle, so to speak. And again, as obviously, with another month of the regular season to go, even if the Seahawks were able to get this victory against the Arizona Cardinals, if they fall flat on their face over the next couple of games, which includes some very difficult matchups, there's no question about it. I mean, the Seahawks are going to be hosting the Green Bay Packers, then the Minnesota Vikings the next couple of weeks, and they're going to be on the road in Chicago, which might not sound that difficult, but it's the day after Christmas. It's going to be cold, at Soldier Field. field, and then, of course, finish up the season at LA. This is an opportunity to create a little bit of distance for yourself. And again, it's we're on the heels of rivalry week in college football. This is an opportunity for Geno Smith basically to plant his flag, in Glendale Stadium and basically say that the Seahawks run the NFC West. So there's, again, I do think that this is an opportunity for Geno Smith. If the Seahawks lose this football game, then I do think that there are other massive opportunities here remaining. Of course, they're going to be playing the Rams, coming up as well, and that to me could wind up being basically the de facto biggest game of Geno Smith's career all over again. But you have to worry about that if you win this football game and are at least competitive in the rest of the way, because you're going to have already created a little bit of space between you and the rest of the NFC West.
You can remove one of your main competitors. That's the big thing here, because like you said, it really is a 3-game lead over the Cardinals because you've won both games against them. You've got the tiebreaker. You can push the Cardinals to the brink there and make it where it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to have a chance to win this division. I just think this is an incredibly important game, not just in the present, but for a quarterback like Geno Smith who's looking for that long-term security. If you want it, go win the division. I think this is critical to get that job done, to get the sweep on the Arizona Cardinals. How do they get it done? Well, we're going to be getting to some key matchups. We're going to be breaking down the Seahawks on offense against the Cardinals on defense heading into their Week 14 rematch that's coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your own phone number along with your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedInNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedInNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedInNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. This episode's also brought your way by our friends over at Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and unlike other apps, Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. They are the only real money daily fantasy platform that offers an injury insurance policy. Even if one of your players gets injured, your lineup stay in play. Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out your lineup. If it isn't perfect, you can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. You can now win up to 100 times your money in Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Go to Prize Picks and download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDINNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDINNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're tuning in from Lakewood, Washington, or Reno, Nevada. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the new and improved Locked On NFL. It's now twice a day. Our good friend from Locked On Titans, I'm messing up names here. Tyler Rowland, our good friend Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans with the Cup of Morning Espresso. And then Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars dishes out our second show with insight, analysis, and a slice of humor. Make sure that you're listening in. It's on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Make Locked On NFL twice a day your second listen. Let's get to our second matchup Wednesday in 3 weeks. Seahawks versus Cardinals. And some of our listeners may be thinking, well, why not just copy paste what you had a couple weeks ago? Well, listen, these teams have now played each other once. We got to see some revelations in that first matchup. We've had another game to assess these two teams as well. And 2 weeks, a lot can change in the NFL. I feel like the Seahawks have had some things that have changed. Certainly, Arizona's had some things that have changed as well. Let's start with the Seahawks on offense. And you and I are highlighting a matchup that I didn't think we would be highlighting a couple of weeks ago. But listen, I don't know what LJ Collier has done the last couple of weeks, but Seattle's former first-round pick, he's starting to play like a first-round caliber player in Arizona's defense. He had a sack, bull rushing Laken Tomlinson into Geno Smith in that first game, and then all he did is go out and get 2 sacks last week against the Minnesota Vikings. Suddenly, we're seeing pass rushing from LJ Collier. And oh, by the way, first-round pick Darius Robinson is back from his injury that kept him out all year. He played 22 snaps last week. He will play inside and outside. So Satoa Lamea, Laken Tomlinson, Oluwatimi, you are going to have to deal with Collier and Robinson in this game, along with Arizona's other interior defenders and a defensive line that is playing better than was advertised going into the season. Now can get a jolt with Robinson's pure talent and his length.
Yeah, and some of those other Arizona defenders, Dante Stills, good football player, Roy Lopez as well. And I think that this is a fascinating matchup from a Seahawks perspective because, as you just said, I mean, Arizona is going to get much more versatile with their very first round pick. Darius Robinson coming back onto the field. LJ Collier is playing good football, a couple of sacks over the last few games. It wasn't just against the Seahawks. But again, just looking at this from a Seattle perspective, Satoa Lamea is going to be the starting right guard. And I kind of, pounded the table for that a couple of days ago based on what I had seen this previous win against the New York Jets. I know Seattle struggled in, their short yardage running a game, but still, Satoa Lamea, what I saw suggested to me that he is going to be Seattle's starter at the right guard position moving forward. Oluwatimi has been very impressive. Certainly Abraham Lucas has as well, but Seattle's inability to run the ball with any type of consistency, as we talked about just a couple of moments ago, Geno Smith's up and down play so far this season. That is what makes this matchup absolutely critical for the Seahawks. And of course, one of the huge differences between this game now and the games a couple of weeks ago, in which the Seahawks beat the Arizona Cardinals 16-6, is just the location of the game. Now the Seahawks are going to have to go up against what can be a formidable home crowd. And so again, to me, this is where this game is going to be won and lost, at least from the Seahawks on offense, is they have to be able to pass protect. They have to be able to run block. And so again, this is going to be a matchup very much to keep an eye on.
And I'm wanting to see where this chemistry with Satoa Lamea and Abraham Lucas goes in their second game together, because it felt like as Sunday's game in New Jersey progressed, that those two started to find a little bit of rhythm. They got lathered up a little bit in the second half. There were actually some plays where they were knocking some Jets defenders off the ball with combo blocks, and then Lamea was getting to linebackers and pancaking them. I mean, there's some really good tape there that we have not seen all year from the Seahawks run blocking. And listen, I think the Jets front line is arguably more formidable than what Arizona's is, at least on paper.
Yep.
Now, Darius Robinson healthy, maybe that changes things. But LJ Collier, he's had issues throughout his career with run defense. Can Satoa Lamea be a difference maker there? Can he win physically against LJ Collier? Can he win physically against Robinson, who's more of an edge guy, but he's got the size to play inside? Can you physically manhandle these guys? They couldn't do it in the first matchup. If you can, that gives them an advantage with the second matchup here, and it's all about the running backs against linebackers. And one of the things that has really stood out to me, Arizona has had the number one run defense in the NFL since week 9, not Seattle. Seattle's number 2. They've both been really good. But one of the big differences has just been the aggressiveness of the linebackers, Mack Wilson and Kaiser White. These two are not the biggest linebackers in the world. They have missed some tackles this year, but they are aggressive. They are feisty. They get downhill. They make a lot of plays near the line of scrimmage. Really, that back seven has been pivotal getting Arizona's run defense fixed up from being one of the worst in the NFL the first 6 or 7 weeks. Just like Seattle, it's been a very similar pathway here in the second half of the season. But these are still undersized linebackers. You can use that aggressiveness against them. And if you can get some linemen to the second level on them, they are not great at shedding blocks. That creates opportunities. Ken Walker III had the biggest holes he's had all year in the second half last week against the Jets. If he can find a way to do that against an aggressive Cardinals defense, and even Zach Charbonnet, maybe that downhill style fits better in this game. If you can get some of those holes and you can have more balance, that's where you can maybe get some of those shot plays the Cardinals have not been giving up in the passing game.
Yeah, and again, you're on the road now, and so you have to be able to kind of mitigate that road noise. You have to be able to kind of slow down the pass rushers and take some of the pressure off of Geno Smith. And so, when I look at the Arizona Cardinals and just the running backs that they faced over the last couple of weeks, of course, this last week they played against Minnesota. The week before that, of course, was Seattle. Then previously the Jets, the Bears, and the Miami Dolphins. Those are not exactly the most formidable running games. So, frankly, I think that the Arizona Cardinals run defense is, a little bit of just peek behind the curtain. Maybe they're not quite as stout at the point of attack as their statistics suggest. Now, obviously, Seattle's statistics in the running game have been very less than impressive. But this does feel like a game where if Seattle remains committed to the running game, I think that Seattle's running game is starting to show some signs of improvement. And again, I just believe that Kenneth Walker III in particular is a guy that is just absolute lightning in a bottle. To me, he is the player that can turn this game around in a blink. And so I really do think that it is critical that Seattle continues to run the football, and they might just get some big plays in the running game as opposed to the Geno Smith necessarily putting the team on his shoulders and being able to have the spectacular game that we were talking about just a couple of moments ago. They would be an awful lot of fun for him to be able to do so.
Speaking of Geno Smith, we are going to borrow one of the matchups that we had from a few weeks ago because, look, there's no doubt about it. When you play the Arizona Cardinals, if you're the opposing quarterback, if there is a player you have got to keep eyes on and know where he's at every single play, it is none other than former UW star Budda Baker. The guy can do it all. He's well over 100 combined tackles. He's got 2 sacks. He's got a bunch of pass breakups. They play him a lot in the box. He can play single high safety. I mean, he plays everywhere. He's basically a positionless safety in Arizona's defense. And they run a lot of sim pressures where they end up sending him. He had one of the sacks on Geno Smith in that game a few weeks ago. You've got to know where he's at because he's sneaky about moving all over the line of scrimmage. They'll play him over the A-gap. They'll play him in the slot. They will move him all over the place. And they'll also drop him back deep. He can be a playmaker with the football in his hands in coverage. He is one of the best safeties in the NFL. Geno Smith has got to be cognizant of where Budda Baker is at all times. Number 3 is the most dangerous player on the Cardinals defense. And you make an argument he's in the top 2 or 3 most dangerous players in this division. You got to know where he's at and account for him every single play. And if you don't, he's going to burn you. And the Seahawks got burned a few times by him a couple weeks ago.
They did. And this time the Cardinals are going to have Jalen Thompson back, the former Washington State safety as well. I think that the Cardinals have one of the better safety duos in all of the NFL. I'm not just saying that just because I'm a Washington resident. I'm always going to be trying to hype up former Huskies, former Cougars. The reality is that these are 2 very talented safeties, but there's no doubt about it. Budda Baker is the superstar in that regard. I think that this is an important matchup. Geno Smith just has to know where Budda Baker is at all times because he's basically going to be the guy that is going to kind of give you an indication of what the Arizona Cardinals are going to be looking to do. And so if he is creeping down into the box, then it's going to be important for Geno Smith to have the flexibility to be able to make those those site adjustments at the line of scrimmage, be able to switch to a different play. We've seen Geno Smith do that and unselfishly do that. Sometimes switch to running play, sometimes switch to quick passes, sometimes go over the top. And it feels like DK Metcalf is starting to kind of get his legs back under him a little bit, struggling, with injuries previously. JSN, of course, has absolutely taken off over the last couple of weeks as well. Tyler Lockett, this feels like a sneaky Tyler Lockett kind of a game here as well. I do think that this is a game where Geno Smith, again, assuming that Seattle's running game is able to keep the Arizona Cardinals a little bit off balance, Seattle has the weapons out there to be able to take advantage of an Arizona Cardinals defense that is solid, but is far from spectacular, Budda Baker being the exception. So that's the one you got to focus in on.
When we come back, we're going to flip the script, and we're going to be looking at the Seahawks on defense going up against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense as they gear up for round 2 coming up on Sunday at State Farm Stadium. Don't go away. You're listening to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and all your resources are in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Trey McBride scoring his first touchdown of the season against the Seahawks on Sunday, or Ken Walker III being the first player with a 20-plus yard rushing attempt. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. To Matchup Wednesday, Week 14 edition here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. And thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Continuing to dive into all the key matchups, we've got a potentially de facto NFC West title game coming up at State Farm Stadium. There's a lot at stake, major playoff implications. And though it's only been a couple weeks since the Seahawks beat the Cardinals at Lumen Field, it's 2 different days. Things can change quickly, and sometimes having these games against rivals this quickly in between, it actually plays into the favor of the offensive coordinators because the game is fresh in your mind, and you have an opportunity to make adaptations. So keeping that in mind, Arizona, Seattle held them to just 6 points, a couple of field goals, and they got a pick 6 in that game from Kobe Bryant a couple weeks ago. The Cardinals did put up 22 points against the Minnesota Vikings. And before that Seahawks game, they were averaging 28 points a game in their previous 4. They won those 4 games. So this is an offense that's very capable of lighting up the skies. When we look at this rematch, what matchup stands out to you first in terms of Seahawks-Cardinals when the Seahawks are on defense?
Well, Corbin, I'm tempted to go to get a running game. I mean, always the running game. But considering how much the Seattle struggled against Trey McBride, the Arizona's tight end, considering the fact that Trey McBride caught a dozen passes against the Seahawks and then did the exact same thing, caught a dozen passes against the Minnesota Vikings this past week as well. Clearly, Kyler Murray is looking to his former second-round pick tight end, Trey McBride, as basically being kind of his de facto security blanket in the middle. So I think that the fact that Seattle has struggled historically against tight ends, that this is a game in which Arizona's play caller is going to be looking to take advantage of some matchups. Seattle has, of course, had some turnover at the safety position. Fortunately, it's because Rayshon Jenkins is now back on the field healthy for the Seahawks. You mentioned the fact that Kobe Bryant had that pick 6, and obviously Julian Love has been playing really good football as well. To me, this is a fascinating matchup because Arizona is very good in this regard. The Seahawks are very good in this regard. If this is the heavyweight matchup that we are building it, then let's just skip the fluff and get right to the heavyweights here. The Seahawks safeties against Arizona's tight end, Trey McBride, as well as obviously the passing that is Kyler Murray. To me, that is going to be one of the most exciting matchups of the entire season.
Yeah, I think that this is the #1 matchup to watch just from the perspective that McBride, he's almost to 80 catches this year. He has been Arizona's go-to receiver. It hasn't been Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's not to say that you ignore Marvin Harrison Jr. We know how he can light up defenses, an outstanding talent. Or somebody like Michael Wilson, who's having a really solid second season for the Cardinals. Trey McBride is the heart and soul of this passing game, though. And the Cardinals, when they did have success in that game a couple weeks ago, it was getting the football to their playmaking tight end. And he has a big-bodied receiver written all over him, but he can block some too. He's been a key component getting James Conner going most of the season. So that, to me, is a matchup to watch. Now, I want to shift gears back to the trenches. And when we talked about this matchup 2 weeks ago, as far as position battles, we highlighted the Arizona Cardinals tackles against Seattle's edge rushers. But I think we've got to shift the focus inside, especially when you consider what Leonard Williams did to this team 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't quite as good of a game as he had against the Jets. He had to have a pick 6 that he returned 92 yards, but 2.5 sacks in that game on Kyler Murray. He had one of them rushing off edge, 1.5 of them rushing from the inside. Arizona's guards Evan Brown, a familiar name, former Seahawks starting center, and Tristan Colon, they could not block Leonard Williams to save their lives. He was in the backfield seemingly every single play. Jaron Reed made some plays in that game. Jonathan Hankins played well, holding up against the run. This was a matchup that was leaning very heavily to the Seattle Seahawks, and the Arizona interior just could not deal with Seattle's talent at the defensive tackle position. Is that going to play out the same way in this game? We'll have to wait and see. Arizona's offensive line as a whole has been really good all year, with that game being an exception where they just could not keep Leonard Williams in particular out of the backfield. And when you're playing Kyler Murray, the short quarterback that he is, if you are able to get interior pressure and you can collapse that pocket back on him where he can't see anything, and then the edge guys make it he can't get outside, it's difficult for him to see anybody. And the Seahawks have had a lot of success doing that the last couple of years, including a couple weeks ago. That goes down to that interior defensive line. Can you muddy things up again for Kyler Murray and make it difficult for him to throw the football?
Yeah, that to me is really a very interesting matchup because, again, what we are comparing it to is when Seattle was at home and Leonard Williams, to use Mike McDonald's expression, is playing out of his mind right now. I think that what Leonard Williams was able to do in Seattle against the Arizona Cardinals team, that frankly, their interior, their offensive line, it just isn't that good. And the Seahawks should be able to create some pressure. But now that you're going to be playing in Glendale, is Leonard Williams going to have the same fire lit under him that he had in Seattle 2 weeks ago, that he had in returning to his old stomping grounds? New York Jets, of course, had selected him number 6 overall a couple of years. I guess it's been more than a couple of years back, but don't want to talk too much about the age of Leonard Williams. He's bigger than I am, for crying out loud. So again, but that to me is going to be one of the fascinating matchups here is Seattle able to create enough pressure up the middle that you are going to force Kyler Murray to go to the outside? And you just basically argued for all the points that I was going to mention here as far as why this is a fascinating matchup. So I will jump outside here for a moment, just because the fact that, Boye Mafe was spectacular against Paris Johnson, Paris Johnson, the left tackle for the former Ohio State Buckeye, now obviously the first round pick, and the left tackle for the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals have some talent at the left and right tackle positions. At the same time, I also think that the Seahawks maybe have, kind of a hidden player. Uchenna Nwosu is back on the field, back on the practice field for Seattle today, Wednesday. Mike McDonald acknowledged as much today. And so, again, I think that this is a fascinating matchup. Seattle has to be able to pen Kyler Murray in. I think the most important matchup would be right up the middle, as you said there, with Leonard Williams certainly taking the starring role. He is the NFC's Defensive Player of the Year, reigning at this point after Kobe Bryant won it 2 weeks ago. So the Seahawks obviously are hot. But at the same time, I also think you have to keep Kyler Murray penned inside, so it's going to be critical for Seattle's edge rushers on the outside to not get too cute as far as just rushing upfield and giving Kyler Murray rushing opportunities. You got to keep him in the middle. Then his lack of height is going to show up, and perhaps you get one of those big defensive linemen. If they're not sacking Kyler Murray, they're able to tip up a pass, maybe get another pick 6 against him.
There you have it. Rob's already projected that Leonard Williams is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Just one Defensive Player of the Week. Maybe he will end up being a prophet, and we'll look back at this episode once he gets that award at the end of the season. Look, it would not be a Seahawks-Cardinals game if we weren't talking about James Conner against the linebackers, because at the end of the day, if Seattle cannot slow James Conner down, they're not going to be able to come close to replicating the production they had a couple weeks ago against this Cardinals offense. He is the lifeblood of Arizona's offense. When they can't run the football effectively and everything's got to be shouldered by Kyler Murray in the passing game, he doesn't have the offensive line in front of him to be able to do that. And when they're one-dimensional like that, really difficult for the Cardinals to find traction. So I'm looking at that matchup with Ernest Jones, who was limited today with a knee injury. My understanding is it was just precautionary. He should be good to go for this weekend. But you've got Ernest Jones, Tyrese Knight. They made their first start together against the Cardinals a couple weeks ago. Can they have another really strong game where they are hitting the hole, they are making plays in the backfield of the line of scrimmage, avoiding blocks, shedding blocks? Are they going to be able to replicate that? And I'm also looking at the passing game where I feel like Arizona kind of got away from getting James Conner involved, catching the football. I could see that being something that Arizona switches up and really tries to get him involved as a pass catcher, and that puts more pressure on both Jones and Knight having to cover him in the middle of the defense. That could be an adjustment. In fact, that's one I'd be surprised if they don't make in this game from a Cardinals offensive perspective.
Well, he caught 5 passes in the last game against the Seahawks, again, in Seattle, where you had to deal with the crowd noise. And, while I misspoke there a moment ago, Leonard Williams, of course, Defensive Player of the Week, not the year. If they are able to slow down James Conner the way that they did in the running game, then, I think that you could make an argument that Leonard Williams deserves to be Defensive Player of the Year. Corbin, it is still one of the most absolutely stunning developments that I have seen. The way that Seattle took a run defense that was abysmal and has made it one of the NFL's best. As we talked about just a couple of moments ago, number 2 in the NFL since week 9. I mean, that is absolutely staggering. And again, the statistic that absolutely blows my mind, 7 rushing attempts for James Conner for a total of 8 yards. James Conner is one of the better run after hit running backs in all of the NFL. He just bulldozes through guys. The way that Seattle was able to shut him down absolutely dropped my jaw. And so I'm skeptical. I don't know that Seattle can do that against a running back this caliber on the road. They just did it against Breece Hall, and I was impressed. But again, Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the New York Jets were basically trying to hand the Seahawks that victory. This is an Arizona Cardinals team that's going to be absolutely desperate. And James Conner, again, as we talked about, is the lifeblood of this team. So can the Seahawks slow him down again? Look, mention Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones as much as you want. I think it's going to be critical that the Seahawks defensive line is able to slow down Arizona's offensive line. Just eliminate those gaps, and that way Seattle's inside linebackers can continue to eat the way that they have over the last couple of weeks.
Before we go, I just want to wish a special thank you to Mike McDonald and his family for welcoming Jack into the world. They've got their first baby boy, was born yesterday. Congratulations to the McDonald family, welcoming in a future linebacker that is going to be playing someday. But special thanks and congratulations to the McDonald family. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Round 2 of Crossover Thursday with Locked On Cardinals will be coming your way tomorrow. We've got a ton of fun stuff we're going to be breaking down heading into this critical rematch at State Farm Stadium. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.